Hey Disney Geeks, welcome to yet another episode of Part of My World where we will dive into the world of Disney and talk about the Disney movies and the stories that inspired them. If you're new to the channel, hi, welcome. My name is Amber and I'm a Disney geek myself and I make Disney related content. So if you like what I do here, please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell to get notified every time I upload. And boy, do we have a nice one today. A story where one of the first penned down versions include rape, unwanted pregnancy, and almost cannibalism. Guess you didn't see that coming. I know you must be curious right now, so without further ado, let's start and let's unravel the world of Disney's Sleeping Beauty. The movie begins with a fairy tale book. A narrator is telling us that a king and a queen in a faraway land longed for a child, and finally this child was born, a daughter, and they called her Aurora. We see the whole land in celebration since a little princess is born. 3 fairies, Flora, Fauna and Merryweather, are also invited to this baby shower of the 14th century. The first 2 fairies give the princess a gift of beauty and song, but before Merryweather can say her gift, the party is interrupted by Maleficent, an evil fairy who wasn't invited. Since of course being uninvited is a reason to curse a baby, that is exactly what Maleficent does. She says that the princess will prick her finger on a spinning wheel when she's 16 and die. Merryweather alters the curse by saying that Aurora will not die but fall asleep and only true love's kiss will wake her. As a reaction, King Stefan burns all of the spinning wheels and the 3 fairies make a plan to take the baby with them and raise Aurora as their own. 16 years pass and they raise Aurora, who they now call Brer Rose, in a cabin in the woods. That day is Aurora's 16th birthday, and when the fairies get rid of Aurora to pick some berries, they work on her dress and cake without magic. In the forest, Aurora meets Prince Philip, who she is destined to marry, but she doesn't know. They fall in love within 5 minutes, and she invites Philip to come over that night. Maleficent is very angry at not being able to find Aurora and sends her raven Diablo to go look for her, since all her henchmen failed. Meanwhile, the fairies fail at doing their task without magic and stupidly decide to do it with magic. It escalates in a fight between Flora and Merryweather over a dress collar. Who made these ladies in charge again? And Diablo, Maleficent's raven, discovers the cabin. He also overhears the talk between Aurora and the fairies, who tell her who she really is, and Diablo flies away to let Maleficent know. Philip tells his father he intends to marry the farm girl he met in the woods. The fairies take sad Aurora back to the castle, and when they leave her alone, Maleficent takes her chance and leads her to the tower of the castle and let her prick her finger. The fairies let everyone in the castle fall asleep. Maleficent abducts Philip, who went to the cabin to meet with Aurora. She did so that he couldn't give her true love's kiss. The fairies free Philip and are being chased by the henchmen of Maleficent. She involves in the rumble when Merryweather turned Diablo to stone. She let a forest of thorns arrive in front of the castle. When this doesn't work because of Philip's magic sword, Maleficent turns into a dragon to fight Philip herself. After a lot of fighting and a lot of green fire, Flora enchants Philip's sword further. Philip throws the sword into Maleficent's heart, killing her. Then Philip goes to Aurora, kisses her, she awakes, and they go down to meet her parents, and the movie ends with a dance of the 2 lovebirds. There are loads of differences between the fairy tale and the Disney movie, but it depends on how many to which version you compare it to. So there are 3 known European versions of the Sleeping Beauty, and there's the first version of Basile, published in the book The Pentamerone in 1634, called Sole, Luna e Italia. And there is the Perrault version, written in 1697, who is called La Belle à Bois Dormant. And there is the Grimm version of the fairy tale, published in 1812, which is called Den Röschen. We are going to compare all 3 of them, because they're all interesting and make sense to do so, but bear with me. So let's start with Basile's version of the story because it's the first one published and it deviates the most from the Disney movie. So in the English, this version is called Sun, Moon and Talia, and Talia is the Sleeping Beauty of this version. So the father of Talia in the story is a great lord, and he asked the wise man to predict his daughter's future. He learns, though, that Talia is in great danger due to a splinter of flax. The splinter causes what seems to be Talia's death, but however, she is just fallen asleep in a deep, long slumber. So her father seats her on a velvet throne, and he locks the doors and he leaves the house forever, thinking that Talia is indeed dead. So one day a king finds the house and he knocks on the door to see if there's anyone home, but of course no one answers the door. So what he does next, he grabs a ladder and he climbs through the window, which makes total sense. I mean, if someone doesn't answer the door, I also grab a ladder and climb in through the window. Anyway, he finds Talia alive but asleep, and there he gathers the first fruits of love. Simply said, he has sex with the poor girl. So he leaves her there in bed and he goes back to his kingdom. When Talia is asleep, she gives birth to twins, and one of them keeps sucking her finger, and he does this so much that the splinter of flask that was into Talia's finger is sucked out, and she awakes, and now she discovers that she is a mother, and not only that, she has no clue what had happened. So the king later decides to visit Talia again, and he has no idea that she was a mother of the twins, but he says who he is, and they end up bonding, and he leaves after a few days, but he promises Talia to take her back to the kingdom when he returns to her. When you thought this first part was weird, you are not ready for what comes next. So, the king apparently already had a wife, and she hears him say in his sleep, Talia, sun, and moon. And after she learns the truth, she pretends to be the king and she writes to Talia, asking her to send the twins because she wants to see them. Talia sends the twins to the king, and she, the queen, asks the cook to kill the children and make dishes out of them. The queen wants to feed the king his own children, but the cook is a good man and he takes the children to his wife and they hide them. So then the cook prepares 2 lambs and he serves them as it were the twins. So every time when the king tells his wife how good the food is, she replies with, eat, eat, you are eating of your own. So later the queen invites Talia to the kingdom and she intends to burning her alive. But luckily the king finds out what is going on with Talia and his children, and he orders that his wife, the queen, is going to be burned alive along with everybody who betrayed him. And since the cook didn't obey the queen, the king thanks the cook by giving him gifts and rewards. And then the king marries Talia and they live happily ever after. Perrault's version is clearly the version where the Disney movie was based on, and it even says so in the beginning credits, you can look it up. The story begins with the christening of the princess, and 7 good fairies are invited. Also, an old fairy is invited, but is overlooked because she lived in a tower for so many years that everyone thought she was dead. So the evil fairy is angry of being forgotten, which I can understand, but what she does next, she goes hard. And then she curses the baby princess that she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. And in this version, the 7th fairy alters the curse by making the princess fall into a sleep of 100 years, just as in the movie the spinning wheels are burned. Instead of leaving with the fairies as in the Disney movie, in this version the princess stays in the castle, and when the princess is 15 or 16 years old, it's not really mentioned, she comes across an old woman spinning a spindle because all the spinning wheels were burned. And the princess asks if she can try because she never seen anything like it. And of course, she pricks her finger and she falls asleep. And the seventh fairy, who also altered the curse, she is the one who then also puts everyone in the castle asleep, and she summons a forest of trees and thorns that spring up around the castle so that the castle is shielded and that no one will disturb the princess. So then 100 years pass and the prince finds the princess and he kisses her and she awakes, and then the prince and princess are married, and she even bears the prince 2 children, which she calls, wait for it, Aurora and Jour, meaning dawn and day. So, and in the end, there's this weird part with the prince's mother being an ogre and wanting to eat the children. And when she's discovered, she throws herself in a pit full of vipers that was meant for the children and the princess. And after that, they live happily ever after. The Grimm version of this story, I will make it short because there are not many differences with the Perrault version. However, there are like 4 that I thought were worth mentioning. So there are 12 fairies invited, and then the 13th fairy is the evil one and the uninvited one this time. So the second one is part of the altered curse is that everyone falls asleep when the princess does so. So like the fairy doesn't make everyone fall asleep after the princess falls asleep, but they fall asleep right away with her. Then the thorns grow over the years, that's the third difference. And the story ends with the marriage of the prince and the princess. So there's not some weird part about eating children and an ogre for a mother and just straight up cannibalism. Over to chapter 3, the making of the Disney movie. So the movie took almost a decade to make. They started writing the story already in 1951 and the movie was released in 1959. So Walt said that making Sleeping Beauty was a real challenge because they already used many of the same tropes in Snow White and Cinderella. So it was very hard to come up with something new. So he decided to do something new with the design of the movie, something bold and modern. The design of Sleeping Beauty was more sophisticated and more decorative than any Disney movie that came before. And Walt wanted a movie illustration, doing something more illustrated and detailed. And every frame of Sleeping Beauty looks like a painting you can hang on the wall. The visual of this movie was based on the unicorn tapestries. Walt handed over the supervisor role for the artistic look of the movie to Ivan Earl, and he had a very unique vision, and Disney wanted to see that being captured. What's also very interesting is that the movie takes the colors and ideas of like the medieval age, but it's also very contemporary because it combines a sort of 50s styles look also in the design. At the way they built up the frames, it's very 50s style looking. Animators had like 2 big challenges in this movie. One was that because the backgrounds were so detailed and so busy that it was hard to make the characters stand out. And 2, they also had to stylize the characters in a way that they would match the backgrounds. Ivan Earl wanted a really big saying in how the characters were drawn and how the colors on the characters would look in the end result.
And you couldn't argue with him about it because Walt picked him. Sometimes his colors didn't work to the advantage of our characters, and so we had some minor battles over that.
The animators rebelled, but Walt didn't back them up because he wanted the characters to match the whole picture of Ivan Earl. Ivan Earl and the animators made some compromises though, especially on the 3 fairies. Walt wanted the 3 fairies to be very similar, like a Huey, Dewey and Louie sort of thing. So I talked about Mark Davies before because he was the animator of Cruella in 101 Dalmatians, but for Sleeping Beauty he was the animator of both Aurora and Maleficent. Mark Davies said that Maleficent was way harder to animate because she wouldn't talk directly to the audience, but instead would just give monologues and walk around a lot with her back to the camera. Wooly Riderman directed the dragon scene.
know how he got through the thorns, or how his horse ever got up there. They used to criticize that thing when I showed it first, but Walt liked it, thank goodness. It didn't need the logic. You didn't have time to think. That thing was driving at you all the time. And that's what gives you the juices. That's what makes your adrenaline go.
Walt called Mary Costa herself the voice of Aurora because he didn't want anyone else for the role of Aurora. Live action modeling was a big part of this movie.
Live reference has often been used in most of the Disney films when it calls for a kind of realistic movement in which they shoot live actors enacting some of the scenes from a picture in which the animators can use as reference.
They would go in and rehearse the scenes with live actors. They'd set it up with props and boxes and then use that as reference.
I was on the stage while we were shooting the live action, get my input into it and how I wanted to see them do something. I wanted it as broad as it could be and give me the most inspiration.
Mark Davis used Mary Costa and Eileen Stanley, like a fusion of both, to base his Aurora off. Eleanor Audley also did the voice of Maleficent in this movie, but was also her live action model, just as she did for Lady Tremaine in Cinderella. Music was based on Tchaikovsky's ballet of Sleeping Beauty. Sammy Fain wrote songs for the movie, however only one song survived, which was Once Upon a Dream, because the rest of the songs had like this big Broadway feel and they didn't match with how they wanted the movie to be. George Bruns wrote the music and he based it on the Gothic arts in the medieval age. First time that the music for this movie was recorded in stereo, and they did this in Germany. Also, for the first time, Technorama was used.
It's a 70mm frame, not running this way, but running horizontally. And I can put Sleeping Beauty on that and widen it out, and it'll be the most breathtaking way I've ever seen animation on the screen.
So what it did for us, down in the trenches, it meant that we had to work on very large sheets of paper, and they were just awkward to work with. Because an animation artist has to flip the drawings back and forth, roll the pages to see the action. And when you've got a paper the size of a bed sheet, and you're trying to work on these little characters on these gigantic sheets of paper, that became a minor problem for us. But that's the format that they wanted to go with.
Like I said in my 101 Dalmatian video, Sleeping Beauty was the last hand-painted and last inked film because the film cost so much money that they needed to find other ways to make animation cheaper. And that's what they did with 101 Dalmatians. However, Sleeping Beauty was still the second highest grossing movie at the box office in 1959, coming second after Ben-Hur. Still, the money it brought in weren't enough to cover the costs. So I thank you all so much for watching the 4th episode of Part of My World. It's a long one, but I had so much, it had to be this detailed because there was just so much to know about his film and about the fairy tales that inspired it, and it didn't feel right to didn't cover everything. So anyway, stay healthy, stay safe, and I see you at the next Part of My World. Bye bye.